The orbital station hung against the starfield like an ancient relic, its steel skin mottled by centuries of patchwork repairs. Inside, the market ring was alive with clashing dialects, metallic scents from alien food stalls, and the ever-present hum of air recyclers struggling against age. It was here, on the very edge of charted space, that the whispers began. No species entered human space. No species came back the same. Some never came back at all. Commander Varric Torin heard the warnings before he even set foot in the docking concourse. Traders leaned in over half-filled mugs, speaking in hushed voices as though the humans themselves might overhear. "Ships vanish," one grizzled freighter captain muttered to a companion. "No wreckage, no distress signals, just gone. Like they never existed." Another claimed entire crews had been found adrift, alive but unresponsive, eyes fixed on some horror only they could see. The stories contradicted each other, but all shared the same conclusion. The human exclusion zone was not a place for the curious. Varric was no stranger to fearmongering. A career officer in the Zorthian defense fleet, he had commanded warships across unstable borders and seen countless fabricated threats used to keep smugglers and opportunists at bay. Yet something about the tension in the voices around him was different, less theatrical, more weighted. The air in the station seemed taut with a caution that had nothing to do with commerce or politics. At the edge of the market, he passed a viewport and slowed. Outside, a hulking, derelict patrol craft drifted aimlessly, its hull gouged with scars that did not match any known weapon signature. The ship's running lights flickered weakly, like the last twitches of a dying creature. Dockhands worked to pull it into a salvage bay, their movements brisk but hesitant. The black box had already been removed, the technicians carrying it away like PALLBEARS. An ensign from Varric's crew approached, holding a datapad. "Sir, preliminary analysis from the station authorities. The craft was found to light days inside the human perimeter. No survivors. Last transmission is odd." Varric took the device and played the file. Static filled his ears, the white noise punctuated by a low, deliberate thump. Another, slightly closer. Then another. The rhythm was steady, like the tread of boots on metal. It faded into a burst of distortion and then silence. He returned the datapad without comment. By the time he reached the secure docking level, his officers were already gathered. 6 ships awaited under his command, heavily armed cruisers designed for deep space enforcement. His orders from the Galactic Council were simple: to investigate the disappearance of multiple scout vessels near human territory, determine cause, and report findings. The Council had been explicit in one regard: no hostile engagement unless provoked. Lieutenant Kale, his second in command, stood near the tactical display, outlining their projected route. "We'll skirt the outer defense net, drop into the perimeter at these coordinates, and proceed in a wide arc toward the central sectors. If the humans are hiding something, this should flesh it out." His tone was confident, almost dismissive. "They're not hiding anything," interjected Navigator Rin. "They're keeping something in, or keeping us out." "The stories," Kale cut in sharply, "are for barrooms. This is a reconnaissance op, not a ghost hunt." Varric let the exchange hang for a moment before stepping forward. "Regardless of what you believe, we approach with caution. The humans are unpredictable. Do not mistake their lack of counsel, presence, for weakness." He let his gaze sweep over the assembled officers. "I don't want a single misstep out there. Understood?" A murmur of assent rippled through the group. Though he could see the skepticism in Kale's eyes, the fleet undocked with the slow grace of seasoned crews, slipping from the station's docking arms and into the black. The jump to the perimeter was uneventful, space swallowing them in its cold, endless silence. Yet, as the stars shifted into their new positions, Varric felt a faint change in the air, an almost imperceptible weight. As if the void here was watching. The human exclusion zone was not marked on most civilian charts. No beacons, no warning satellites, and an invisible boundary that all who valued their lives seemed to obey. As the fleet approached, sensor screens began to flicker with faint returns. Unidentifiable, unclassified, gone before they could be. Locked communications hissed with intermittent static despite the clear line of sight. Engineering crews reported brief fluctuations in power, seconds-long dips that left no trace in the logs. The men grew restless, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting someone to be standing there. "Sir," Rin called from the navigation pit. "Something's trailing us. Can't get a visual, but it's matching our speed exactly. Every time we adjust course, it does too. Put it on the display." The main screen lit with a grainy sensor overlay, and there it was, a faint silhouette, small enough to evade most detection systems, keeping just outside weapons range. The moment they tried to focus on it, it blurred and vanished. Seconds later, it was back. "Could be automated drones," Kale offered, though his voice lacked conviction. Varric said nothing. He simply watched the shadow follow them, unwavering. They were still 3 hours from their intended drop point when a transmission cut through the static clear, sharp and utterly uninvited. "You've got 3 minutes to turn around." The voice was male, deep, and edged with the kind of certainty that came from someone who had never once been ignored. After that, the voice continued. "You belong to us." Kale frowned. Unknown frequency. "It's not council standard." "It," Varric ordered. The comms officer shook his head. "Already tried." "Source isn't holding still, it's moving between at least 4 points." Varric leaned forward. "Identify yourself." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, colder than before. "You already know who I am." And just like that, the channel went dead. The silence that followed was heavier than the vacuum outside. The shadow on their sensors was gone. Rin exhaled, too loud in the quiet. "Sir." "Was that maintained course?" Varric interrupted, though the faint tightening in his jaw betrayed his unease. Somewhere ahead, beyond the darkness, humanity was waiting. And whatever they were guarding, they did not intend to share. The border of the human exclusion zone looked no different from any other stretch of deep space. But the men aboard Varric Toron's fleet could feel it. There was a stillness here, an absence of the cosmic clutter that usually filled the void. No drifting ice, no stray debris, no trace of civilian lanes. It was as if the very idea of passage had been erased. The fleet moved in formation, engines at low burn. Every hall sensor tuned to its sharpest resolution. For nearly an hour after the cryptic warning, nothing stirred. The shadow that had tailed them earlier had vanished entirely. Yet the sense of being watched persisted. Varric stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes fixed on the forward display, one hand resting on the arm of his command chair. Each flicker of the sensor readouts pulled at his focus. He had commanded through sieges and sieged worlds in return. But this silence was a different kind of battlefield, one where the enemy fought with the air you breathe and the thoughts you could not silence. Picking up signal distortions, the comms officer reported. Not local, direction unknown, could be a relay bounce. Kale leaned over the man's shoulder. Could also be our phantom friends again. Or, Varric said evenly, it could be nothing. He didn't believe that. Not entirely. The faint crackle that crept in and out of the comm systems was no accident. Every so often, the distortion shifted like someone testing their grip on the edges of his fleet's perception. The humans weren't hiding. They were measuring. Without warning, one of the escort cruisers flanking the formation winked off the tactical map. No explosion, no maydage, just gone. Gasps erupted across the bridge. Where the hell did they go? Kale demanded. Rin's hands flew over the navigation console. No warp signature, no debris. Nothing. 1 second they were there, the next, there. Not dead. The comms officer interrupted, voice strained. I'm still reading faint life signs from the ship's registry. It's not here anymore. Before Varric could order a scan sweep, the forward display flickered. The static cleared, revealing a vessel sliding into view from the darkness ahead. Its profile was unlike any in the Council's archives, angular yet fluid, black hull plating. Drinking in the starlight, it moved with a precision that suggested neither haste nor hesitation, as though time itself bent to its pace. The comms lit again. You're still here, the same voice said, low and unhurried. That was your first mistake. Varric stepped forward. Identify yourself. The reply came almost lazily. Captain Elias Kade. You've been told to leave. I am acting under the authority of the Galactic Council, Varric countered. We are investigating multiple disappearances in this sector, including the vessel you I haven't touched your vessel. Kade interrupted. Yet. On the bridge, several officers exchanged uneasy glances. There was no visible escort around Kade's ship. Yet the sensors were picking up flickers of mass all around them, brief ghost readings of enormous displacement. Gone before any lock could be made. You think your orders matter here, Kade? Went on, his tone sharpening. They don't. In this space, your authority ends where mine begins. You abducted my crew, Varric said, his voice hardening. You sent them into our territory, Kade replied flatly. We're holding them until we're sure they can go home without what they've seen making the rounds in Council space. And if I refuse to leave, there was a pause. When Kade spoke again, his words were almost a whisper. Then you'll stay. Permanently, the transmission cut. Kade's ship turned without apparent thrust and slipped away, vanishing into the black like it had never been there. Track him, Varric ordered, but the sensors came up empty. The ghost readings surrounding them faded. Kale turned to him. Sir, this is exactly what the Council feared, humans operating outside any treaty, answering to no one. We need to call in reinforcements before we lose another ship. Varric's gaze remained on the forward view, as if he might will Kade's ship to reappear. No, he said at last. If we leave now, we come back with nothing but more rumors. And the Council doesn't fight wars on rumors. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. But the formation resumed its crawl deeper into human space. 2 hours later, a new reading appeared: massive objects, long-range scans, placing them at tens of kilometers in length. They were arrayed in a perfect arc ahead of the fleet, closing slowly but without deviation. Each reading was sharp for a moment, then softened, blurred, and vanished before reappearing in a slightly new position. Those aren't asteroids, Rin murmured. No, Varric said quietly, his eyes narrowing. Those are ships. The display, lit with a web of lines tracing the predicted intercept paths. The arc was tightening around them, cutting off every route but one back the way they came. Kale's voice was low, but urgent. Sir, they're hurting us. Not yet, Varric said, though his tone carried less certainty than before. They're showing us. As the arc closed further, the interference in the comm systems grew sharper, patterns emerging in the static like half-heard voices. The men shifted at their stations, unsettled, unable to tell whether the words were in the noise or in their own minds. Then, as abruptly as it began, the encirclement stopped tightening. The massive signatures vanished one by one, leaving only the empty path forward and the silent void behind. Varric stood in the center of the bridge, the silence pressing down like deep water. He understood then that the humans could have ended this at any moment, yet had chosen not to. That meant they were waiting for something. The only question was whether he'd live long enough to find out what it was. The corridor of space they entered was like a vein carved through darkness, narrow, deliberate, lined with jagged sensor shadows that pulsed faintly on their displays. No natural formation explained it, and no star charts recorded it. The fleet, advanced in single file, forced into the channel as if an unseen hand had arranged it that way. The farther they went, the heavier the silence became, as though sound itself was being stripped from the void. Varric stood at the command dais, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The ghostly signatures from earlier had returned, not in the shape of a ring, but in parallel lines on either side of the corridor. Whatever was out there was moving with them, matching their pace exactly, yet never revealing more than the occasional sensor flare suggestion of scale that hinted at vessels large enough to eclipse moons. The precision of it gnawed at him. Predators might stalk, but this was choreography. Kale leaned close, his voice pitched low. "Sir, we've been in their space for 17 hours without resistance. That means they're letting us be here. I don't like what that implies." "They're studying us," Varric said, without looking away from the screen. "For what?" Varric didn't answer. A sharp tone cut through the bridge comms, reactivated. The display lit with a cold, dim image. A human in full combat armor. Helmet mag-locked to his side, dark hair cropped close to the skull. His gaze was unflinching, his posture one of absolute control. "Commander Varric Turan," Captain Elias Kade said, as if reading from a dossier. "Zorathian Defense Fleet. Service record commendable. Tactical scores above average, known for. Calculated risks, though not without misjudgments." The air on the bridge seemed to tighten. Varric kept his voice level. "If you know me, then you know I am here on council orders." "I know you're here without invitation," Kade replied. His tone edged with iron. "I know the council's habit of sending scouts first, warships later, and diplomats only if they've already won. And I know that you ignored a direct warning from me. You abducted my crew." "I secured them," Kade said, without pause, "from a situation they could not survive. They are alive. You should consider that a courtesy." Varric's jaw tightened. "If you want this to end without incident, release them and allow us to depart with our report." Kade almost smiled, but the expression never reached his eyes. "You're in no position to negotiate. You're in a position to listen." The display shifted, showing a map of the galaxy. Small red points began appearing, coordinates spread across sectors far from human space. Each was labeled with the date of an engagement. "These are every time in the last 300 years that another species has crossed into our territory uninvited," Kade said. "Not all of them came in warships. Some were scouts, some smugglers, some supposedly neutral observers. Every single one was stopped. Most were sent home in pieces." One of the red points flared brighter, revealing tactical schematics of a massive engagement, dozens of alien capital ships, all marked as destroyed. "This was the first and only full-scale invasion attempt," Kade said. "It lasted 49 hours. When it ended, there was nothing left of the fleet that crossed our border. The survivors on the ground surrendered in less than a day. And then the map zoomed in on the human exclusion zone, its borders etched in harsh white. We stopped talking to the galaxy. We stopped trading. We stopped asking permission. And we made it very clear that anyone who came here without our consent would be dealt with in the same way." Kale's voice cut through the silence. "You expect us to believe the council didn't retaliate?" "They tried," Kade said, eyes never leaving Varric. "They sent their best fleets, their most trusted admirals. And when they failed, they did what bureaucracies do best. They pretended. It never happened. Which is why your archives called this sector unexplored." The image flickered back to Kade's armored form. "You've been told the history. Now you will see the policy." The transmission ended. A moment later, the fleet shuddered not from weapons fire, but from the sudden, total collapse of their propulsion systems. Engines offline, weapons unresponsive, shields dead. "What the?" Rin's voice cracked as his hands raced over the controls. "It's like someone just rewrote the whole system's architecture. Everything's locked out." Varek kept his voice even. "Damage control. Now." Before the crews could respond, the forward view lit with a ripple in the black. Ships emerged from invisibility's sleek, predatory vessels, each bristling with weapon arrays unlike anything in Council records. Their movements were eerily synchronized, and their hull plating seemed to shift subtly as if alive. The closest one drifted alongside Varek's flagship, its scale dwarfing their own vessel. No weapons discharged, no boarding craft launched yet. Every man on the bridge felt the unspoken truth. The humans could end them all before a distress signal could leave the ship. A comlink opened again, audio only, this time. Kade's voice was calm, controlled, the tone of a man not making a threat but a promise. "I will give you one final chance, Commander. Turn your ships around. Leave your crew members we have secured with us. They will be released when we decide. It is safe. Ignore this, and your fleet will never leave this corridor." Varek glanced at Kale, who gave a subtle shake of his head. Retreat meant humiliation, but survival. Refusal meant certain defeat, perhaps something worse. "What guarantee do I have that you'll keep your word?" Varek asked. "You don't." Kade replied simply. The channel closed. The human ships began to drift back, their positions shifting as though they were peeling away from the corridor walls. The path home lay clear behind them now, and the implication was unmistakable. Take it, or the trap would close again. Varek's hands tightened on the rail of his command dais. Every instinct in him screamed that to leave now was to return as a failure, his mission undone, his crew humiliated. But there was something in Kade's precision, his effortless control of the situation, that made the alternative unthinkable. Before he could give the order, the forward display flared with a sudden, blinding pulse. The corridors flanking shadows solidified, dozens of human warships snapping into full visual existence. Each was positioned with surgical precision. Weapons arrays already locked onto every vital point of Varek's fleet. The message was silent but undeniable. "Kale," whispered Sir. Varek raised his hand to steady him. His gaze was locked on the central vessel in the human formation, the one he knew Kade commanded. It did not move, did not signal, did not need to. The whole display was a language in itself, and it spoke. With perfect clarity, "You have already lost." He let the silence stretch a moment longer before lowering his hand. "All ships," he said quietly, "hold position." Somewhere deep in the void, Varek sensed the humans waiting for his next move, not with impatience, but with the patience of predators certain of the outcome. And he realized then that this was not a standoff, it was a lesson. The human fleet did not move to fire, but the weight of their presence pressed against Varek's mind like the looming shadow of a mountain. Each vessel was perfectly still, yet every sensor on the bridge screamed that hundreds of weapon locks tracked his ships with lethal precision. The corridor of darkness that had drawn them in now felt like a noose, and he was standing at its tightening point. Kale's voice was low, almost reverent. "Sir, we can't win this." Varek's jaw flexed. No commander walks away from a mission with nothing to show for it. "This isn't nothing," Kale said, eyes flicking toward the display. "It's survival." Before Varek could answer, the comms snapped open, revealing Elias Kade's face again. The man looked exactly as he had before, calm, composed, utterly unshaken, but there was a finality in his gaze now. The look of someone delivering a verdict, already decided. "You've had your chance," Kade said. "You've stayed. That was your second mistake. Varek forced his voice to remain steady. If you mean to destroy us, then do it. But I will not turn back under threat. Kade didn't blink. This isn't war, Commander. This is border control. The connection severed, and the void outside erupted not in fire, but in motion. The nearest human ship seemed to dissolve into fragments of shadow, only for those shadows to reform inside his formation. Smaller vessels, sleek, blade-like craft materialized alongside each alien cruiser, in perfect synchronization. There was no weapon discharge, no explosion. Instead, every console aboard Varek's flagship went black in an instant. Emergency lights flooding the bridge in red dot, reports poured in over the short-range comms. Propulsion dead, weapon systems unresponsive, reactor cores locked in stasis by some foreign override. Even life support was no longer under their own control. The humans had not destroyed them, they had simply taken their ships from them. As easily as a man removing a toy from a child's hand. Through the viewports, Varek saw the boarding craft detach from Kade's vessel. They moved with quiet inevitability, drifting toward the flagship like sharks approaching a bleeding prey. He did not order the hatches sealed. There was no point. The boarding team entered without a shot fired. Black armored soldiers moved through the corridors with mechanical precision, their weapons lowered but ready. Each step echoed in the silence, heavy boots striking metal with the same slow, deliberate rhythm Varek had heard in the derelict's final recording. Kade entered last. He wore no helmet, his expression unreadable, eyes scanning the bridge as if cataloging every man present. He stopped before Varek. The two men regarding each other with a stillness that seemed to drain the air from the room. "You fight like a man used to winning," Kade said, voice low enough that only those closest could hear. "That's dangerous in the wrong territory." "You could have killed us hours ago," Varek replied. "Yes," Kade said simply, "but dead men don't carry messages." Kade stepped closer, his presence like a physical weight. "When I send you back, you will tell the Council exactly what happened here. Not the details, they wouldn't understand the details, just the truth. That no species enters human space uninvited, ever." "You think fear will keep the galaxy away forever?" Varek asked. "It has for 3 centuries, Kade said. "And the next time someone tries, we'll remind them again and again. Until there's no one left who forgets." Kale, standing a few paces behind, shifted uneasily. Varek caught the movement, but kept his eyes on Kade. There was no bluff here. No posturing, only the unshakable certainty of a man who knew his position was absolute. "How do I know you'll release the crew you took?" Varek asked. "They're already on your ships," Kade said, "unharmed, unarmed, and very quiet." With a gesture, Kade signaled his men, and just as silently as they had entered, they withdrew. Systems across the fleet flickered back to life engines, humming, reactors stabilizing, weapons cold but operational. It was as if the paralysis of the past minutes had been nothing but a dream. Yet the echo of boots on metal still seemed to linger in every corner of Varek's mind. Kade paused at the threshold of the bridge. "When you reach your border, you'll find a message waiting in your databanks. Play it once. Then delete it. That will be your proof." Then he was gone, his soldiers vanishing into the boarding craft, which detached and returned to the waiting human fleet. The warships withdrew in unison, their movements as fluid and inevitable as the tide receding from a shore. The path home was open. Varek gave the order to turn the fleet, and the formation began its slow retreat. Not one human ship moved to follow. Yet the oppressive awareness of being watched lingered until the very edge of the exclusion zone. When the fleet cleared the invisible line, the message appeared in Varek's databanks. He opened it. The screen filled with Kade's face once more. His tone was not hostile, Nor was it warm, it was the voice of a man delivering a universal law. This is not a threat. It is not a warning. It is a fact. The moment you cross into our space without consent, you belong to us. You will not conquer us. You will not study us. You will not survive us unless we permit it. No species enters human space. Now you understand why. The transmission ended, leaving only the soft hum of the ship. Varric sat in silence for a long time before finally ordering the message deleted. He knew the Council would demand explanations, would want proof of the impossible control the humans had shown, but the truth was not in the day-tick, was in the memory. Etched deep in the mind of every man who had stood in that corridor of darkness and seen what waited there. Weeks later, when the fleet finally docked at a Council station, the other commanders asked him what he had seen. Varric only said, "Do not go there." And when pressed, he said nothing more in the stillness of his quarters. Far from the human border, he sometimes heard it again, the steady, deliberate rhythm of boots on metal, the sound that had heralded the end of his mission. He knew he would carry it for the rest of his life. The galaxy's most dangerous truth was not in their weapons or their ships. It was in their certainty. Humans did not bluff.